So we've just finished discussing and talking about water, and now we're going to discuss acids, bases, and pH. And you may wonder what the two actually have to do with each other. Well, the answer to that question is that water has to do everything with pH. What we're going to talk about today, the key question, is why is it important for cells to buffer solutions against rapid change in pH? And the answer to that question has to do with maintaining homeostasis, which remember was a characteristic of life. Sometimes water molecules will actually split apart, and when they do, they will form hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. Remember, an ion has a charge. So here would be our hydrogen ions, and here's the hydroxide ion that our water split into. The reaction is written with these arrows that go back and forth, these double arrows. It shows that this reaction can actually occur in either direction. So the water molecules can be split apart, or these molecules can form water. In pure water, not very many of the water molecules will split apart, but sometimes they will, and they'll form ions, because the number of positive ions equals the number of negative ions. Pure water is what we call neutral. It has no charge. So the pH scale, it goes from 0 to 14. This is just a simple measurement system. It helps us measure how many hydrogen ions are in a solution. The more hydrogen ions, the more acidic it is. The more hydroxide ions, the more basic it is. Whenever you have the same number of hydrogen as hydroxide, it then has a pH of 7, which is neutral. Now, most of the substances in your body are kept around a neutral pH, but not everything. Stomach acid, for example, has a really low pH and is very acidic. Most of the cleaners that we use have a high pH, which means they're extremely basic. The important thing to remember is that from 0 to 7, you're acidic, and from 7 to 14, you're basic. At exactly 7, it has a neutral pH. This picture is a little fuzzy, but it does help you to see in a little better detail where some basic substances of life are. Notice that toothpaste is basic. Seawater is actually basic. Human blood is close to neutral, but a little basic. Pure water, of course, is neutral. And milk, it's actually a little acidic. Tomato juice, lemon juice, stomach acid, of course those things are also very acidic. And you'll notice that the lower we go down on the scale, the more acidic some of those items become. Although on the actual scale it looks like we're only moving one number at a time, the pH scale actually represents a factor of 10. So when you go from 4 to 5 on the pH scale, 4 actually has 10 times the number of hydrogen ions that something with a pH of 5 has. So what is an acid? An acid is any compound that's going to form hydrogen ions in solution. An acidic solution contains higher concentrations than pure water. Strong acids usually have a pH that range from 1 to 3. Hydrochloric acid, for an example, is a really strong acid that's produced by your stomach to help break down food. On the opposite end, then, we have the bases. The bases are going to form hydroxide ions in solution. Basic, or what we call alkaline solutions, contain a lower concentration of hydrogen ions than water, and their pH values are above 7. Strong bases, for example, are lye, so a lot of times we'll call it sodium hydroxide, and their pH values, really strong ones, are from 11 to 14. So let's talk about a buffer. The pH of the fluids within most of your cells are kept between 6.5 and 7.5. That helps us to maintain homeostasis. If the pH is lower or higher, it's going to affect the chemical reactions that take place within your cells. And if those chemical reactions don't occur, your cells then aren't functioning. And when your cells don't function, you don't function. One of the ways, though, we can control that pH is through dissolved compounds that are called buffers. Usually these are weak acids or weak bases, and they can react with the strong acids and bases to prevent really sharp, sudden changes in pH. So if you look at the figure below, you have an unbuffered base, you add an acid, and you get an acidic pH. If you have a buffered base, you add an acid, you get a basic pH. So what we're trying to do here is to neutralize some of these substances. So here's that figure again to talk about it in a little more detail. If you add an acid to an unbuffered solution, which is what we have here, you're going to get something that is very acidic, and you're going to change that pH quite drastically, which isn't good. But if you add an acid to a base that is buffered, your change is nowhere near as drastic. You'll notice this is about here on the scale as opposed to this one, which was way over here. So it's going to help keep your changes from going drastically one way or the other. It's only going to cause a slight change, which is something your body can actually handle. It's within a range of being able to tolerate. So let's review a little bit. We know that we need buffers. We know that buffers help us to guard against extreme changes in pH. And we know that pH runs from 0 to 14, with 0 to 7 being our acids, 7 to 14 being our bases, and 7 being neutral. We know that this means anything that is an acid has more hydrogen ions, and we know that anything that is a base has more hydroxide ions. We know that pure water is 7 because it breaks up into exactly 1 hydroxide and 1 hydrogen ion.